Dae-ho Kim stood in the center of the Great Council chamber and watched as the voting lights turned red one by one. Each red light meant another alien species had voted against humanity. The Velthari delegates sat tall in their crystal chairs, their blue skin gleaming under the chamber lights. They looked pleased with themselves. The Keth representatives tapped their claws on their desks, making soft clicking sounds that meant they were happy. Around the massive circular room, dozens of other species watched the final count appear on the main screen. Resolution 7749 had passed with an overwhelming majority. Humanity was now classified as an auxiliary species. Dae-ho felt the weight of what this meant settle on his shoulders like a heavy coat. No more voting rights in council decisions. No more equal treatment in trade agreements. No more respect for human territorial claims. Worst of all, Earth and all human colonies would now pay 80% of their industrial output as tribute to the Galactic Council. The Velthari overlord Kesvar rose from his seat. His voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. The Council has spoken wisely today. For too long, these humans have acted above their station. They forget they are newcomers to our ancient civilization. Today, we remind them of their proper place. Many delegates made sounds of agreement. The Keth administrator Thulvin clicked his claws faster, which was how his species showed approval. Indeed, Overlord Kesavar speaks truth. Humans have been useful servants, but they began to think themselves equals. This resolution corrects that mistake. Dae-ho waited for the chamber to quiet down. He had served as human ambassador for 15 years. In all that time, he had watched his people build bridges across the galaxy. Human engineers had fixed broken stargates when no one else could. Human doctors had stopped 3 different plagues, from wiping out entire worlds. Human farmers had taught other species how to grow food on dead planets. Human merchants had connected distant worlds with trade routes that brought prosperity to everyone. Now the Council wanted to take credit for all of that work while treating humans like slaves. When the chamber finally fell silent, Dae-ho walked to the speaking platform. The platform rose slowly until he stood level with the highest delegates. Every eye in the room watched him. Some looked curious about what the human would say. Others looked bored, as if his words would not matter anyway. Dae-ho spoke in a calm, clear voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. Honored delegates, humanity has heard the Council's decision. We understand your position perfectly. After careful consideration, humanity respectfully withdraws from all galactic affairs. We thank you for the opportunity to serve alongside you for these many years. That was all he said. No anger in his voice, no threats, no pleading for the Council to change their minds. He simply bowed once to the chamber, turned around, and walked toward the exit. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Some delegates shouted questions at Dae-ho's back, but he did not turn around. Others argued, among themselves, about what the human ambassador meant. Overlord Kesavar slammed his crystal gavel 3 times to restore order. Let them go, Kesavar declared with a wave of his hand. Good riddance to the arrogant primates. They think they can threaten us with their departure, but we will manage perfectly well without them. Administrator Thulvin nodded his scaled head. Agreed. We kept them around because they were useful tools, nothing more. There are other species who can do their jobs just as well. Outside the council chamber, Dae-ho walked through the space station corridors toward the human embassy. Other humans he passed looked at him with worried faces, but he gave them small nods that said everything was going according to plan. None of them seemed surprised by what had happened in the chamber. In the embassy, Dae-ho found Sujin Park, waiting for him. Sujin was the chief engineer of the Terran Engineering Corps, the group responsible for maintaining most of the technology that kept galactic civilization running. She was a small woman with calloused hands and grease stains on her uniform, but she knew more about advanced technology than anyone else in the galaxy. How did it go? Sujin asked. though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Exactly as we expected," Daeho replied. He sat down at his desk and activated his communication console. "Send the signal to all human colonies and ships. Protocol Exodus begins now." Sujin smiled grimly. "I've been waiting 30 years to hear those words. My teams are ready." Across the galaxy, the signal reached every human settlement, ship, and outpost. On distant mining colonies, human workers quietly packed their belongings and boarded transport ships. In the great shipyards of the Outer Rim, human engineers downloaded critical files and began shutting down systems. On trading stations throughout Council space, human merchants closed their shops and prepared for departure. Captain Bo-Ram Lee received the signal aboard her merchant vessel while docked at a Keth trading hub. She had been moving cargo between worlds for 20 years, connecting isolated colonies with vital supplies. Her ship was one of thousands in the human merchant fleet that kept galactic trade flowing smoothly. Bo-Ram gathered her crew in the ship's main cargo bay. "Everyone knows what this signal means," she told them. "Pack only what matters most. We leave in 6 hours." One of her younger crew members raised his hand. "Captain, what about our contracts with the Keth? We're supposed to deliver medical supplies to their outer colonies next week." Bo-Ram shook her head. "Not our problem anymore. The Council made their choice. Now, they get to live with it." Meanwhile, Tae-Young Choi was coordinating the evacuation from his office on New Seoul, one of the largest human colonies in Council space. As Director of Human Colonial Affairs, he knew exactly how many humans lived throughout the galaxy and where they all were. The evacuation plan had been prepared for decades, updated and refined by each generation of human leadership. "All civilian. Transports are ready," reported his assistant. "The last convoys will depart in 72 hours. Tae-Young nodded. "What about the infrastructure?" "Sujin's teams are handling the shutdown procedures. Everything will look normal until the last human leaves, then the systems will begin failing gradually." Tae-Young allowed himself a small smile. The aliens thought they could use humanity and then throw them away when it became convenient. They were about to learn that civilization was more fragile than they realized. Back on the Council station, the alien delegates continued their celebration. They passed new resolutions dividing up human territory among themselves. They made plans for how to use the tribute payments from human worlds. They congratulated themselves on solving the human problem so elegantly. None of them noticed that the human embassy had gone completely dark. None of them realized that every human on the station had quietly boarded their ships and left. They would not discover these facts until the next morning when they tried to contact the human engineers about a minor technical problem and found no one there to answer. 6 months had passed since the humans walked away from the Galactic Council. Overlord Kesevar sat in his command chamber on the Velthari homeworld, staring at reports that made less sense each day. The first problems had seemed small, almost silly. A few stargates had stopped working properly, causing delays in shipping schedules. Some communication arrays had developed strange glitches that made conversations sound fuzzy. A handful of food processing plants had shut down for unknown reasons. Now those small problems had grown into something much worse. "Report," Kesevar commanded his aide, a younger Velthari with nervous energy who kept shifting from foot to foot. "Sir, we have lost contact with 17 outer colonies in the past week. The Nexus Gate network is experiencing cascade failures across 3 sectors. Food shipments to our core worlds are running 6 weeks behind schedule." Kesevar's blue skin darkened with anger. "How is this possible? Our engineers said the human departure would have minimal impact." His aide consulted his datapad, hands trembling slightly. "Sir, our engineers are discovering that human involvement in our systems was far more extensive than anyone realized. They did not simply operate our technology, they designed most of it from the ground up." This news struck Kesevar like a physical blow. The Velthari had always prided themselves on their technological superiority. They were supposed to be the most advanced species in the galaxy. How could primitive humans have been running their civilization without them even knowing? On the other side of Council space, Administrator Thulven faced similar problems in his administrative complex. The Keth Federation had built their entire society around perfect bureaucratic efficiency. Every citizen had a file. Every transaction had a record. Every decision followed proper procedures. Now that system was falling apart piece by piece. "Administrator," called his chief secretary, rushing into the office with a stack of printed reports. "The central database is corrupting data faster than we can back it up. We have lost the records for 3 billion citizens in the outer provinces." Thulven clicked his claws in distress. How can a database simply corrupt itself? These systems were built to last for centuries. "That is what we thought, sir. But our technicians have discovered something troubling. The database architecture was designed by human programmers 50 years ago. It appears they built in certain requirements that we never understood. Without their maintenance protocols, the whole system is breaking down." The secretary handed him another report. "Sir, there is more. Our food distribution network has collapsed in the Meridian sector. 12 worlds are facing starvation." Thulven stood up so quickly that his chair fell over backward. "Starvation? How can that be possible? We have enough food production to feed our entire population 3 times over." "We do have the food, sir, but we cannot deliver it. The cargo ships cannot navigate properly without the human-maintained navigation systems. The preservation units are failing because they require maintenance codes that only humans knew." Meanwhile, in a small medical facility on the mining world of Kepler Station, Dr. Yithara of the Zentari species watched her patients with growing horror. The pale yellow beings lying in the medical beds were dying from Rigel fever, a disease that had been completely controlled for over 40 years. The vaccine synthesis machines had stopped working 3 days ago. Dr. Yithara and her medical team had tried everything they could think of to repair them, but the machines used technology far beyond their understanding. The instruction manuals were written in technical language that might as well have been ancient poetry for all the sense it made. "Doctor," called her head nurse, "we just received word from the planetary governor. The epidemic is spreading to the civilian population. We need those vaccines." Dr. Yithara looked at the silent machines that had faithfully produced vaccines for decades. She had never questioned how they worked, only that they did work. Now she realized that her people had become completely dependent on technology they did not understand, maintained by humans they had taken for granted. "Send a message to the council," she said quietly. "Tell them we need human medical engineers immediately." Her nurse looked confused. "Doctor, I thought all the humans left months ago." "Then we are in more trouble than I thought." On trading stations throughout the galaxy, the economic collapse was becoming impossible to ignore. Captain Velthara of the independent freighter Blue Comet had been trying to deliver a cargo of rare metals to the Proxima Industrial Complex for 3 weeks. Every time she arrived at a way station to refuel or resupply, she found closed docks and empty storage bays. "Where are all the merchants?" she asked the dockmaster at Beta Centauri Station. The dockmaster, a tired-looking member of the Corvin species, shook his head sadly. "Gone, Captain. All the human traders left months ago and no one else has taken their place. We used to process 50 ships a day through this station. Now we are lucky to see 5 ships in a week." Captain Velthara looked around the nearly empty docking bay. "But surely other species can handle cargo transport. How hard can it be to move goods from one world to another?" "Harder than you might think, Captain. The humans did not just move cargo, they organized the entire system. They knew which worlds needed what supplies and when. They maintained the shipping schedules that kept everything running smoothly. Without them, we are all just flying around in circles, hoping to find someone who wants what we are carrying." Back on the council station, emergency sessions were being called every day as new crisis reports arrived from across the galaxy. The great chamber that had been filled with celebration 6 months ago now buzzed with panic and confusion. Overlord Kesavar stood at the speaking platform, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled desperation. Honorable delegates, we must face the truth. The human departure has caused more disruption than we anticipated. Perhaps it is time to reach out to them and negotiate their return. Many delegates made sounds of agreement, but Administrator Thulven rose to object. Absolutely not. If we beg the humans to come back now, we will look weak and foolish. Other species will lose respect for the Council's authority. What authority? Shouted a delegate from the back of the chamber. My people are starving because our food shipments have stopped arriving. 3 of my colonies have gone dark because their communication systems failed. What good is authority if we cannot protect our own citizens? The chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates wanted to send diplomatic missions to human space immediately. Others insisted that they could solve these problems without human help if they just tried harder. A few suggested that the humans had somehow sabotaged galactic infrastructure before they left, though no one could explain how or why. Through it all, one fact became increasingly clear to everyone in the chamber. They had no idea where the humans had gone. Sujin Park had done her work too well. Every human colony, ship, and outpost had vanished without a trace. The aliens could not negotiate with people they could not find. They could not threaten people who had disappeared completely. In the deepest levels of the Council station, automated systems continued their slow, inevitable breakdown. Life support processors that had run perfectly for decades began developing. Small errors. Gravity generators started fluctuating in ways that made people feel dizzy and sick. The great star maps that helped navigate ships through dangerous space sectors flickered and went dark one by one. The humans had not destroyed anything when they left. They had simply stopped maintaining systems that required their constant attention. Now those systems were dying like plants without water, and no one else knew how to save them. 18 months after the humans disappeared, the Velthari homeworld faced its first famine in over 300 years. Overlord Kesavar stood on the balcony of his palace and looked out over fields that should have been green with crops. Instead, he saw brown dirt and dying plants stretching to the horizon. The agricultural systems that had fed his people for generations had failed completely. The automated farming machines sat silent in the fields like metal graves. The climate. Control satellites that regulated weather patterns had stopped responding to commands. Even the soil itself seemed to be dying, as if some vital element had been drained away. "How many people do we have left?" Kesavar asked his chief advisor, who stood behind him with a data pad full of terrible numbers. 43 million on. The homeworld, sir. Down from 67 million a year ago. The outer colonies are in even worse condition. Kesavar closed his eyes. He had ruled the Velthari Empire for 30 years, expanding their territory and increasing their power throughout the galaxy. Now, he watched his civilization crumble like an ancient building with rotten foundations. What about the emergency? Food supplies from other worlds? His advisor's voice grew even quieter. "Sir, there are no emergency supplies. The supply networks have completely collapsed. Most trading ships cannot even find their way between star systems anymore." On the other side of the galaxy, Administrator Thulven faced an even more complete disaster. The Keth Federation had always run on information. Every citizen carried identity cards linked to vast databases. Every business transaction was recorded and tracked. Every government decision was based on careful analysis of detailed records. Now, all of that information was disappearing into digital darkness. "Show me the status report," Thulven commanded from his emergency command center deep underground. The main government buildings had lost power 3 weeks ago, when the fusion reactors developed problems that no one knew how to fix. His technical chief, a nervous Keth named Rilvok, activated a small portable display. "Sir, we have lost contact with 80% of our member worlds. The central database has suffered cascade failures across all primary servers. We estimate that 95% of our governmental records have been permanently destroyed. Thulvin stared at the screen showing red warning lights across a map of Keth space. How is it possible for a database to simply destroy itself? We have been investigating that question, sir. Our remaining technicians discovered something in the old system documentation. The database architecture included something called recursive maintenance protocols. These protocols required constant updates from human programmers. Without those updates, the system was designed to purge old data to prevent corruption. Designed by humans to require human maintenance, Thulvin said slowly. They built a trap into our own information systems. Rilvak shook his head carefully. Not exactly a trap, sir. More like a safety feature that we never understood. Our people assumed it was just routine maintenance. We never realized that our entire civilization depended on human programmers updating our systems every few days. The full weight of their situation settled on Thulvin like a crushing weight. The Keth had always prided themselves on being the galaxy's greatest administrators. They had managed the paperwork and legal frameworks that held galactic society together. Now they discovered that even their own bureaucracy had been secretly dependent on human expertise. Meanwhile, in the medical facilities scattered across council space, a different kind of disaster was unfolding. Dr. Yathara had watched Rigel. Fever spread from her small mining station to 3 nearby worlds. The disease that had been eliminated decades ago was now killing thousands of people every day. But Rigel fever was not the only medical crisis. On distant worlds, other diseases were returning like ghosts from the past. Zentari lung rot had reappeared. On 7 colonies, Corvin blood poisoning was spreading through the Outer Rim territories. Diseases that had been controlled by human-developed vaccines were coming back stronger than ever. Dr. Yathara had managed to contact other medical facilities through the few communication channels that still worked. What she learned terrified her more than any single epidemic. The human medical research stations are all empty, she reported to the emergency council session via a crackling audio connection. We sent scout ships to investigate 3 different facilities. The buildings are intact, but every piece of research data has been deleted. The vaccine production equipment has been shut down permanently. Overlord Kesavar, participating in the session from his dying homeworld, asked the question that everyone feared to hear answered. Doctor, without the human medical research, how long before these diseases spread to every world in the galaxy? Dr. Yathara was quiet for a long moment. Based on current infection rates, I estimate 6 months before we face a galactic pandemic. Maybe less. The council chamber, now operating on emergency power and staffed by a skeleton crew, fell completely silent. Outside the station, space looked different than it had 2 years ago. The usual streams of cargo ships and passenger transports had dwindled to almost nothing. Many trade routes had been abandoned entirely when navigation systems failed and no one could maintain them. Captain Boram Lee had been one of the human merchants who coordinated those trade routes. From her hidden observation post in a distant star system, she watched the collapse through long-range sensors. Her merchant fleet had been just one part of a vast network that connected thousands of worlds with regular supply runs. The aliens had never realized how complex that network really was. They thought cargo ships just flew randomly from world to world, carrying whatever goods they happened to have. They did not understand that every delivery was carefully planned. Human merchants knew which colonies needed medical supplies before plague season started. They knew which agricultural worlds would have surplus food at harvest time. They knew which industrial centers required rare metals for their manufacturing processes. Without that coordination, the galactic economy had collapsed into chaos. Ships carrying food arrived at worlds that needed medical supplies. Cargo holds full of industrial equipment sat in empty space because their destinations had been abandoned. Raw materials piled up on mining worlds while factories on distant planets shut down for lack of supplies. The breakdown was not just economic. Social order was collapsing as well. On Beta Proxima, the colonial government had declared martial law after food riots left 12 people dead. The Corvin Trading Consortium had dissolved into warring factions fighting over the few remaining profitable routes. Even the mighty Zentari hegemony was facing internal rebellion as outer colonies declared independence rather than starve waiting for supplies that would never come. In the council chamber, desperate delegates proposed increasingly extreme solutions. Some wanted to send military expeditions to search for human colonies. Others suggested that they should try to rebuild their civilization without any human technology at all. A few even proposed surrendering to whoever could provide basic necessities for their starving populations. Administrator Thulvin, appearing via hologram because his homeworld no longer had the power to send him in person, raised a trembling claw. "Honorable delegates, we must face reality. We sent exploration fleets to search human space 6 months ago. They found nothing. Empty systems where our records showed thriving human colonies. It is as if the humans simply vanished from the universe." This was true, though the aliens did not understand why. Soo-Jin Park and her engineering teams had spent decades preparing for this moment. When the humans left council space, they had not simply moved to distant colonies. They had activated cloaking technology that hid entire star systems from detection. They had retreated to pocket dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. They had technologies that the council races could not even imagine, let alone detect or counter. From their hidden refuges, human leaders watched the galactic civilization they had helped build tear itself apart. Some felt sadness at the waste and suffering. Others felt satisfaction that their former oppressors were learning painful lessons about the value of cooperation and respect. But all of them agreed that the lesson was not yet complete. 3 years had passed since humanity's quiet departure, and Admiral Jiwoo Kang stood on the bridge of the hidden vessel Eternal Dawn, watching holographic displays show the final collapse of galactic civilization. The ship hung in folded space, invisible to any sensors the council races possessed. Around him, his command crew monitored the last gasps of the empire that had once dismissed humans as useful servants. Jiwoo had been preparing for this moment for 30 years. As a young officer, he had proposed Protocol Exodus to the Human Leadership Council. Most had thought his plan was too extreme, too paranoid. They believed that cooperation and goodwill would eventually earn humanity the respect they deserved from their alien allies. Jiwoo had known better. He understood that civilizations built on arrogance and exploitation would eventually turn against anyone who threatened their sense of superiority. So while human diplomats worked for peace and human engineers built galactic infrastructure, Jiwoo had quietly prepared for war. Not the kind of war fought with weapons and violence, but something far more devastating: complete withdrawal of human cooperation. "Admiral," called his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Yuna Shin, "we are receiving the final transmission from the Velthari homeworld." On the main screen, Overlord Kesavar appeared. The once proud alien leader looked like a broken shadow of his former self. His blue skin had faded to a sickly gray color. His magnificent robes hung loose on his starving frame. Behind him, the great palace that had symbolized Velthari power for centuries was dark and empty. To any human vessels that might be monitoring this frequency, Kesavar said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I formally surrender the Velthari Empire to human authority. We were wrong to treat you as servants. We were fools to think we could survive without you. Please, if any humans are listening, we beg for your help." Jiwoo watched the transmission without emotion. Around the bridge, other human officers maintained professional silence, though he could see satisfaction in their eyes. The empire that had demanded human submission was now begging for human mercy. "Any response, Admiral?" asked his communications officer. "Not yet," Jiwoo replied. "Let them wait a little longer." Lieutenant Yuna Shin consulted her intelligence reports. She had been monitoring the collapse from the beginning, tracking every failed system and every abandoned colony. Her job was to make sure the lesson was complete before humanity revealed itself again. Admiral, our deep space monitors show that organized government has collapsed in 97% of former Council space. The Keth Federation officially dissolved last week when Administrator Thulvin died of starvation on his homeworld. The remaining populations are scattered across isolated settlements with no interstellar communication. Jiwoo nodded. The collapse had proceeded exactly as Protocol Exodus had predicted it would. Remove human expertise from galactic civilization, and the entire structure would fall apart within 5 years. It had actually taken less time than expected. What about the search fleets they sent to find us? All destroyed or missing, sir. The last Velthari expedition entered the Kepler Nebula 3 months ago and was never heard from again. This was not entirely true. The expedition had been intercepted by human vessels using technology far beyond anything the Council races possessed. The alien crews had been taken to comfortable prison facilities on hidden human worlds, where they were treated well but kept completely isolated from any way to report back to their governments. Commander Yoon-ji-oh had been in charge of those interception operations. Her ships used quantum stealth systems that made them completely invisible to alien sensors. When Council fleets entered areas where humans might be hiding, her forces simply made them disappear without a trace. The aliens had no way to fight an enemy they could not see or detect. Their most advanced warships were easily outmatched by human technology that had been secretly developed during decades of apparent cooperation. While human engineers had publicly maintained alien infrastructure, human scientists had privately been revolutionizing every field of technology imaginable. Commander O reports all alien military forces have been neutralized, Yuna Shin continued. The few remaining ships are either too damaged to operate or have been abandoned by their crews. Jiwoo walked to the main viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of aliens were struggling to survive without the human support they had taken for granted. He felt no pleasure in their suffering, but he also felt no guilt. They had chosen this path when they decided to treat humanity as a servant species. "Sir," called his science officer, Dr. Minho John, "we are receiving reports from our observation posts throughout the galaxy. The social collapse is now complete. Most surviving populations have reverted to pre-industrial technology levels." Dr. Minho Jeon had been instrumental in developing the hidden technologies that made human survival possible. While working openly as a theoretical physicist, he had secretly been perfecting dimensional folding technology, quantum cloaking systems, and self-sustaining closed-loop ecosystems that allowed human colonies to exist completely independently of galactic infrastructure. The aliens had always assumed that humans were just good at fixing things and following instructions. They never imagined that human intelligence was actually far superior to their own, or that human technology had advanced centuries beyond anything they possessed. "Doctor, what is the status of our hidden colonies?" "All secure, Admiral. Our population has actually grown by 12% during the past 3 years. Our agricultural systems are producing surplus food. Our manufacturing capabilities exceed what we had during Council membership. We are completely self-sufficient." This was the part of Protocol Exodus that Jiwoo was most proud of. While the aliens had thought they were exploiting human labor, humans had actually been building a completely separate civilization in hidden dimensions and cloaked star systems. Every human who worked in Council space had also been supporting secret human colonies that the aliens never knew existed. When the time came to leave, humanity had simply stepped sideways into their hidden civilization and continued growing stronger, while their former oppressors collapsed. "Admiral," Yuna Shin said quietly, "we are detecting massive population movements in the Outer Rim territories. It appears that the surviving alien populations are attempting to migrate toward the galactic core, probably hoping to find worlds that still have functioning infrastructure." Jiwoo considered this information. The aliens were becoming refugees in their own galaxy, wandering through space looking for any world that could support life. Most would die during the journey. The few who survived would find only dead worlds and empty space. Any signs that they are learning from this experience? Some indications, sir. We have intercepted communications suggesting that several species are attempting to form cooperative alliances instead of the old dominance hierarchies. A few groups have actually established democratic councils where all species have equal votes. This was encouraging news. Protocol Exodus had not been designed simply to destroy alien civilization. Its deeper purpose was to teach the galaxy that true strength came from cooperation and mutual respect, not from exploitation and dominance. "Begin Phase 2, Ji-Woo commanded. "Prepare the negotiation vessel." Around the bridge, officers began activating systems that had been waiting dormant for 3 years. Soon, humanity would reveal itself to the galaxy again. But this time, they would do so as the dominant civilization, offering partnership to those species wise enough to accept it and leaving the others to face the consequences of their arrogance. Thutter. Lesson was almost complete, but the most important part was yet to come. 5 years after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, a single human ship appeared in the ruins of what had once been the greatest space station in the galaxy. The council chamber where Resolution 7749 had been passed was now a dark, cold tomb drifting through empty space. Emergency power kept life support barely functioning in a few sections where the last surviving delegates waited for death. Sung-Ho. Nam materialized on the station's main docking bay through advanced transportation technology that the aliens had never seen before. He wore the simple gray uniform of the Human Federation Diplomatic Corps, with no weapons or guards accompanying him. Behind him, his ship waited silently, its hull shimmering with energy patterns that made it difficult to look at directly. The few remaining station personnel who witnessed his arrival scattered in fear. For 5 years, humans had been like ghosts, in their nightmares, blamed for every disaster and sought desperately by anyone hoping for salvation. Now one had returned, walking calmly through corridors where aliens had once strutted with arrogance. Sung-Ho made his way to the council chamber, where he found 7 survivors huddled around a failing heating unit. They represented the last, remnants of species that had once ruled vast interstellar empires. Overlord Kesavar was there, his once magnificent form reduced to skin and bones. A few Keth administrators sat nearby, their scales dull and cracked from malnutrition. The others came from smaller species that had followed the Council's lead in oppressing humanity. When they saw Sung-Ho enter the chamber, several of them fell to their knees. Others simply stared in shock, as if seeing a creature from legend. "Walk into their reality, please," whispered Kesavar, his voice barely audible in the vast empty space. "Please help us. We were wrong. We admit it. We were completely wrong about everything." Sung-Ho walked to the center of the chamber and stood where Dae-Ho Kim had stood 5 years earlier. The irony was not lost on him. This was where the Galactic Council had voted to reduce humanity to servant status. Now those same aliens begged for human mercy in the ruins of their collapsed civilization. "I am here to deliver a message from the Human Federation," Sung-Ho said in a clear voice that carried easily through the chamber. "You believed you could use us and discard us when it became convenient. You have learned that civilization is not built by those who rule, but by those who serve. We offered you partnership. You demanded subservience. We gave you exactly what you asked for, a galaxy without human interference." Kesavar crawled forward on his hands and knees. "We understand now. We see our mistakes. Please, there are still millions of our people scattered across the galaxy. They are starving, dying. Surely you would not let entire species become extinct over our foolishness." Sung-Ho looked down at the broken alien leader with neither cruelty nor compassion, just the calm assessment of someone stating facts. "Your people are not dying because of our absence. They are dying because your civilizations were built on exploitation rather than cooperation. You created systems that required constant maintenance by others while contributing nothing yourselves. When those others left, your systems collapsed because they had no real foundation. One of the Keth administrators spoke up, his voice cracking with desperation. But surely some arrangement can be made. We can offer you anything you want. Territory, resources, slaves from other species. Name your price for helping us rebuild. The offer revealed that even in their desperation, the aliens still did not understand what they had done wrong. They still thought in terms of dominance and submission, of buying cooperation with bribes rather than earning it through respect. Sung-ho shook his head. You still do not comprehend the lesson. You offer us slaves, proving that you learned nothing from your experience. You want to rebuild the same exploitative system that just collapsed, only with humans on top instead of you. He activated a small device that projected a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Most star systems appeared as red dots, indicating worlds where organized civilization had completely collapsed. A few yellow dots marked places where small groups of survivors struggled to maintain basic technology. Scattered throughout the display were green dots representing thriving worlds under human protection. This is what remains of your great galactic civilization, Sung-ho continued. But look more carefully at the green sectors. The display zoomed in to show the human-controlled regions. These areas were not empty of alien life. Instead, they showed mixed populations where humans and various alien species lived and worked together as equals. These are the species that chose cooperation over domination, Sung-ho explained. When their governments collapsed, they approached us not as conquerors demanding tribute, but as neighbors asking for help. We welcomed them into the Human Federation as full partners with equal rights and representation. Kesevar stared at the display with growing understanding. You saved some of us. You chose who would survive based on their willingness to treat you as equals. We chose nothing, Sung-ho corrected. Each species made their own choice. Some, like the Andrali Collective, immediately abandoned their hierarchical systems and established democratic governments. Others, like the Ferran Republic, had never participated in the exploitation of humans and welcomed the chance to build something better. Still others sent delegations that genuinely apologized for past wrongs and demonstrated real changes in their societies. He gestured toward the survivors in the chamber. Your governments, however, continued to send military expeditions to hunt us down and force us to return. Even when your worlds were starving, you spent resources on trying to conquer us rather than asking for help. You proved that you had learned nothing. The truth of this statement hung in the air like a weight. During the past 5 years, the Velthari and Keth had indeed spent their remaining resources on increasingly desperate attempts to locate and capture human colonies. They had never once sent a simple diplomatic message asking for negotiation or offering genuine apology. Commander Eun-ji-oh, watching from the observation deck above the chamber, noted the psychological impact of Sung-ho's words on the alien survivors. Years of monitoring their communications had shown exactly what kind of leaders these were. Even facing extinction, they had chosen aggression over humility. "What happens to us now?" asked one of the other survivors, a member of a species whose name Sung-ho did not bother to remember. "That depends entirely on you," Sung-ho replied. "The Human Federation is willing to accept refugees from failed civilizations, but only under certain conditions. You must abandon all claims to special status based on your species or former position. You must accept that you will start over as ordinary citizens with no more rights or privileges than anyone else. Most importantly, you must demonstrate through your actions that you truly understand the principles of equality and cooperation." Kesevar looked around at his fellow survivors. "And if we refuse these terms?" Sung-ho's expression did not change. "Then you are free to continue as you are. We will not help you, but we will not harm you either. Your fate will be entirely in your own hands, as it always was." This was perhaps the cruelest mercy of all. The humans would not even grant them the dignity of being worthy enemies. They would simply be ignored, left to face the consequences of their own choices without interference. The transport ship will wait in orbit for 72 hours, Sheng-Ho continued. Any of you who wish to accept our terms may come aboard. You will be taken to resettlement colonies where you will be given basic necessities and the opportunity to start new lives. But understand that this offer will not be repeated. Make your choice. With that, Sheng-Ho turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the survivors to contemplate their options. As his footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, the aliens huddled together in desperate discussion. Some argued for accepting the human terms, no matter how humiliating they seemed. Others insisted that their pride was worth more than their lives. A few wondered if this was all some elaborate human trick, designed to torture them further. None of them seemed to understand that the humans genuinely did not care what they decided. Humanity had moved on to build a better galaxy, with partners who shared their values. The old council races were simply irrelevant now, their former territories filled by species that had proven themselves worthy of respect. From her hidden observation, Post, Commander Yunji. O watched the last representatives of the former galactic powers argue among themselves in the ruins of their failed empire. The lesson was complete. Those who treated their friends as servants had ended up with neither friends nor servants, exactly as humanity had warned them would happen. The galaxy belonged to those who understood that true strength came from lifting others up, not keeping them down.